What's going on, everyone? My name is LB the Realist, and this is Surrealistic Studios, where the real is surreal. I thank you for joining me today. So, with the deaths of Stephon Clark and Danny Ray Thomas fresh in our minds, I was doing some thinking to myself, and I was wondering where people's perspectives were on the issue of people fleeing from police officers, and if fleeing from a police officer warrants an execution, or more specifically, I guess, does crime warrant executions? So I was doing a little bit of research, and I came up with some numbers here, and I thought that was very interesting. So far this year, 277 people have died due to police violence, or being shot by the police. Last year, at mappingpoliceviolence.org, the numbers were 1,146 in 2017. According to the Washington Post, 987 people died due to police. And most of those people that died from police violence or from being shot by the police were actually people that had weapons supposedly on them, whether it be a gun or a knife, or what Washington Post describes as unknown weapon. So what I've found in looking at these numbers is that most of these, if not, well, yeah, most of them, I'd say probably 90 to 95% of all of these incidents, there was no body cam. There was no body cam. 277 people so far this year, most of them no body cam. Now, I know that a lot of times when you have a body cam, it really doesn't matter because the cop ends up getting off anyways. I read in 2015, what was it, 99.9% of police officers were not indicted in 2015. So, it wouldn't surprise me if we had body cams and they're still held unaccountable, because that's one of the issues, is that these police officers aren't held accountable for their actions because they aren't supposed to. So in thinking about this deeper, and when you realize that 684 police officers died between the years of 2010 and 2014, that's a 5-year span. In 5 years, 684 police officers have fallen, and 272 out of those numbers, 272 out of 684 police officers died actually from automobile accidents or being struck by an automobile. So almost half of police officers in our country, in the United States of America, die because of vehicles, because of either vehicle collisions or being struck by a vehicle. Almost half. So just keep those numbers in mind. And 277 people have died from police just this year, alone. So we're slowly climbing up this ladder, or I shouldn't say slowly. We're moving up this ladder, and it's important to note that while we ask ourselves these questions on whether fleeing from a police officer warrants death in this country, or whether crime or being suspected of a crime warrants death in this country, there are actual laws on our books that say very much so, yes, being suspected of a crime very much so does warrant death. So let me just go ahead and read a little bit of what I got here. There's something that I ran across. It's called Fleeing Felon Rule. The Fleeing Felon Rule. Now, this rule permits use of deadly force against an individual who is suspected of a felony and is in clear flight. I'll read that again. It's called the fleeing felon rule. It permits the use of deadly force against an individual who is suspected of a felony and is in clear flight. That means if you're a black man in America, or anybody that's poor, or anybody that has no power, you could be you could be anybody, just anybody that the police deemed possible troublemaker. If they so-called suspect that you have a felony and you run from the police, they can, and most likely will, shoot you. That is American law. So I came across another little factoid here. It's called Tennessee versus Garner. Those of you that are well versed on Constitution, on laws, would probably recognize this. So this states that, and this was in 1985, deadly force may not be used unless necessary to prevent escape, and the officer has probable cause to believe that the suspect poses a significant threat of death or serious bodily harm to the officer or others. Again, this is Tennessee versus Garner, 1985. Deadly force may not be used unless necessary to prevent escape, and officer has probable cause to believe that the suspect poses a significant threat of death or serious bodily harm to the officer or others. These are rules set in place that basically give authorities the loophole they need in order to carry out the execution all across this country. In order for them to carry out the execution of young black men or of black men of any age, dark-skinned people, little white ladies with metal walkers, pleading young white men on their knees, begging the officers not to shoot them, trying to follow every single direction of the officer, while being honestly scared shitless because you're being told, contradictory things. So the problem is, if you run, you can be shot and will be shot. If you stay and do what the officer says, you may be shot and can be shot. So there's not a lot of room here for error on our part, being the American citizens that are being controlled and overruled by those with money and power that hire citizens and give them authority to rule over other citizens. And they're given the license to kill, quite literally. So, in looking at the numbers at the Washington Post, like I said, 277 people have died so far this year. I came across a story of Ronald Foster. Ronald Cat Daddy Foster, as some called him. 33 years old, black man in Vallejo, California. So apparently the story with him, he was riding his bike in Vallejo when he was confronted by a police officer who claimed that he had been riding his bike in an unsafe manner. Mr. Foster flees on foot. The officer takes chase. The officer then catches up to Mr. Foster. They have a scuffle. The officer then says that Mr. Foster somehow wrestles his flashlight away from him, the officer, and points it in his direction in an aggressive manner, or in a threatening manner. So naturally, then the officer that caught up to him then shot and killed Ronald Cat Daddy Foster. Now, there's some extra layers in that story. Not only did Mr. Foster flee, but supposedly, as the officer supposedly stated, he took his flashlight and pointed it in his direction in a threatening manner, which prompted the officer to then shoot and kill Ronnell. So, obviously, it's not a fair fight here. You have an officer that's very much armed with a gun, with a taser, with a baton, with a flashlight. Somehow, there's no backup involved. He catches up to Ronnell, a scuffle ensues, and his flashlight is somehow wrestled away from him. He points the flashlight at him in a threatening manner, and the officer used his deadly weapon to shoot Ronnell. That's the police force that we have here in America. That's who we're supposed to think of as heroes. Wow. It only says to me that these people that are so-called heroes are more cowards than anything. When 684 police officers die in a 5-year span between 2010 and 2014, and 987, possibly 1,146 people die from police violence in a year, I mean, the numbers aren't adding up equally here. So, it's very sad, you know. It really discourages me, and I know that it discourages a lot of people. But I wanted to go over some possible proven solutions again that I posted in a previous video. So for those of you that didn't see my previous video, you can go ahead and watch that, and I'll leave that in the description so you guys can check that out, just so it, it can make it a little easier for you. But these are proven solutions from the useofforceproject.org. And when they implemented these policies, these proven solutions, they found that police violence and police killings actually reduced significantly. So they studied some police departments, and this is what they found. When they required the officers to use all other means before shooting, they reduced police killings by 25%. When they required the use of force be reported every single time, they reduced police killings by 25%. When they banned chokeholds and strangleholds, they reduced killings by 22%. When they have the use of force continuum, which states how much force can be used against a resisting subject in a given situation, they reduce police killings by 19%. When they require de-escalation, they reduce killings by 15%. When they have a duty to intervene if another police officer uses excessive force, they reduce by 9%. When they restrict shooting at moving vehicles, they reduce police killings by 8%. And I found, researching the Washington Post information, that a lot of those police shootings were actually at people in their vehicles, whether fleeing or not fleeing. And the last one, when they require a warning before they shoot, they reduced police killings by 5%. And again, I'm just going to go ahead and give another plug for community-led policing. This is something that we have to implement yesterday. Just like they're having the big March for Our Lives movement, and just like the teachers are having their big strike moment, black people, we need to have our moment. We need to really make it known that enough is enough and something has got to be done. We came up with a possible minor fix with body cams, and these body cams are not being implemented. I read somewhere they did a study of police stations across the country. Let me see if I have the numbers here. They did a study of police stations across the country. I believe it was like 70 of them. And of the 70 police stations that they studied, they found that 18% of them said that, what did they say? I'm going to find it right now. Only 18% of the agencies that they studied considered their body cams fully operational. And that was an article in 2016 from governing.com. They studied 70 agencies, and out of those 70 agencies, 18% of the 70 said that their body cams only 18% of them said that their body cams were fully operational. So, with 277 people die, when 277 people are being killed in a year, you would think that the body cams would be evidence they would use to show, you know, the officer did nothing wrong, that they followed regulation, and that, you know, they did what they had to do. But in most of these cases, like I said, 95% of these people that are being shot by police officers, there's no body camera. There's no footage to review. But the ones that we do have video footage for, those are the ones that catch on quick. Those are the ones that get the most spotlight in mainstream. But so many others are not filmed. And police officers are not being held accountable for the ones that we see with our own eyes. So with the implementation of the fleeing felon rule in Tennessee versus Garner, that states that if you're fleeing and the officer has probable cause, he can legally shoot you to death. Just like they did to Stephon Clark in his own backyard. Just like they did to Danny Ray Thomas. Just like they did to Ronald Foster. So I'm getting sick and tired of hearing that we as black people need to stop committing crimes. It doesn't matter what we did, as long as we're not threatening the officer or threatening anybody else's life. That crime does not warrant death if you're not being threatening. If you're not trying to kill anybody yourself, you don't deserve to die. Not like that. That's not what we pay our police officers to do. We don't pay them to be assassins. We pay them to uphold policy. Last time I checked, murder was against American policy. But it seems to be very American in these days. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Like this video if you like, share it if you feel as though it's shareable. I do. Find me on all social media. Become a subscriber so I can keep speaking my truth. So I can keep speaking and keep connecting with you. Because as I'm speaking to you, as I'm As I'm giving you the knowledge, I'm taking in knowledge as well. This is a give and a take, a push and a pull. So let's all get in on this together. Let's all keep networking. Let's keep fighting. Let's keep strong and keep vigilant. Remember to love from your hearts. A little love never hurt nobody. Peace.